Our next speaker has been the leader of several Drexling organisations and is the first female executive director of Drexling Australia. Today she'll be talking about how her leadership has evolved over time and what she believes the next generation of leaders need in the future. Please welcome Gill Stapleton.
So, how's my leadership? I feel a little bit like I'm suffering from imposter syndrome following these two amazing women, but also because there's a few people in the room who've actually worked for me over this period of the 18 years. So that makes me, I'm looking around going, oh yeah, whatever I say, they're going to go, no. So, a couple of points I want to say first of all is have what I look for in a leader and people joining us at the DSA or any organisation changed? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely changed in the 18 years that I've been here and perhaps longer. But what I haven't, and I'll talk about that in a moment, what I haven't seen change is us as women stepping forward. And I had a recent and a long-term example of that. When I was made aware of the job for weekenders, which is how I launched my corporate career. You know, I was in direct selling for many years in the UK, running a home-based business in weekenders. I was in a sales training role. I was in a meeting not dissimilar to this, and the founder of the company stood up there and he said, "Oh, we've really struggled. We've been trying to recruit to fill the Australian role, and we've been advertising for 6 months, and we haven't found the right person." And I sat in that room and I said, "Well, they never asked me. Why didn't they ask me?" And I got really upset. And then afterwards I thought, well, hang on a minute, there's an opportunity here for me to ask why. So I went up to George, the founder of the company, and said, "I'd like that job and I'd like to know why you didn't ask me." And his unconscious bias, which is what reminded me, said, "We've got a husband and 2 children living in England. I never thought you'd relocate." And I said, "I will." And 3 months later, we landed in Sydney. So what that taught me is we must ask, we must step forward as women, because it's still there. And what disappoints me, and I'm sharing with you, is we recently had board nominations for our DSA board. As you'll know, we lost a couple of board members, 2 female board members, and we replaced them with 2 males. Why? Because nobody stepped up. None of our women stepped up to do that role. And whilst I did try, I'm not really supposed to, and I've got 2 board members here, but as women we need to step up. And sometimes we'll get told no, and that's okay. But I think we suffer a bit from, and we're going to talk a little bit later, I think, about the imposter syndrome. Oh no, I'm not good enough, I'm really not that good, and no, I don't tick all the boxes. And we've all heard the story of the resumes where a man looks at a job and if he's got 1 quality, sorry guys in the room, then he thinks he can do it. A woman looks to see if she's got all 10. And that still is happening. So when Chelsea and I were talking about this, do I look for different things in people now than I did when I employed at USANA? Many of you here are from USANA. Absolutely I do. When I was at USANA, I was privileged to work for Bill Duncan, a life member of ours, and I absolutely loved my time there with him. But I also learnt what not to do, because Bill was a great teacher, but some of his stuff was really old school now. He'd be fine me telling you this. But he would look at a resume, he would go through it, he'd highlight it, he'd red pen it, and he'd look for all the skills and everything that we needed for that role. And that's how we hired for many people. And I have to say that's how I hired probably people in USANA. But gradually over time that has changed. I'm not necessarily looking for all of those technical abilities anymore. And I know Tamara, another good colleague of mine, our previous director, when we were hiring at Phoenix, she would look at a resume and she'd go, "Oh, there's gaps. I don't like gaps." I quite like them, because it means they've probably gone and done something. No, I don't like gaps. I want to know why they've jumped from one to another. But actually that makes me curious more than anything of what were you doing and did you travel? Well, that's great. If you traveled, I love that, because it means you're more rounded. So when Jen Asher left us a couple of years ago, I remember being devastated. I remember crying all the way to Melbourne on a plane to meet my husband, who was down there to celebrate my 60th, my sister's 60th, not mine. I got off the plane, and my husband's been my rock throughout my entire career. And I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. Jen's leaving, and I don't know what to do." And it was Friday afternoon, wasn't it? You remember the Friday? And he just turned to me And he said, what are you so worried about? I don't know, I'm going to replace her. And he said, call Paul. And I went, oh. He said, Paul's one of the best. I went, oh. And as I went, Paul is the best relationship builder, I believe, in the business. Sorry, I'm embarrassing you now, but you are. You are an amazing relationship builder. And that's what our service at DSA is about. It's about building relationships. Now, that's not to say that Paul didn't have the qualifications he needed for the job. He has and more. But it was a skill that I wouldn't have known he had if I hadn't worked with him in previous role and kept in contact with him over time. And that's what I think it's important. You know, is as you work with people, you may move on, but it's important to keep in touch and network, because you never know when that skill set that they have that's not written down. One of the other things that I think about being rounded and skill sets that we'll look for in the future, so I think we'll look for those more soft skills, those emotional skills, much more than the technical skills, because Google's amazing. Chelsea's taught us so much about Google. It's taken her a year to have the courage to, before we ask her a question, to say, did you ask Google? Now we're getting pretty good at it. But I've lost my train of thought then. But I think moving forward, it will be the more rounded emotional skills. So many of you would know I spent 2 years as the CEO at Special Olympics, which in many ways I thought was going to be my dream job. When I saw that come out, I had the, oh my God, that's my job, that's my job. And I had a friend help me write the application and all of this, and I wrote extensively letters and stuff. When I was appointed, and the chair of that board, Mark, is still a great friend of mine, I said to him, so why did you hire me? What was it? I had no skills in not-for-profit. I know nothing about disability. I didn't know how to talk to somebody who had Down syndrome, and that was my job. And he said, well, to be honest, you were pretty rounded, and if you can run a few marathons, you were here for the long haul. I went, oh, so that was what was important to him, was you can set a goal, you can stick with it, you've got tenacity. He knew what it took because he'd done one. So I think it's about being more rounded as we move forward. And I think for the generation coming up, it's going to be really important to look at those skills, but also to know how, and I don't know the answer to this, I'm sorry, but how do we get that on a piece of paper when you don't know somebody? What is that going to be? I learned from my daughter, when she was applying for a job with World Vision 4 years ago, she did an interactive video resume. It's amazing. She has this website with pictures of her communicating with children in Africa. And that's one way of doing it. It showed the diversity of her career, which she couldn't have written down. And to this day, we think it's why she got the job at World Vision. But I think that's going to be far more important. And I'm not saying a degree isn't important in knowing your skill set, but it's also going to be that communication, those softer skills that it's going to be hard to communicate. But as we network and as we work together, people will help you. And the last point I want to make, because I think it's something that's really passionate I'm about, is as women, we're not incredibly supportive of each other when we go for promotions. We're really not. Whereas I know the guys, they tend to be really, yeah, you can do it, no, go, I'll put you forward. We don't tend to help each other well enough to inspire each other. And, ultimately, sometimes the job may not be for you, but it might be for somebody else. And I think it's up to us, all of us as women, to help each and every one of us to have opportunities and empower them. And hence why poor Chelsea has probably not had a night's sleep last night, because I've thrown her up here at the front. And it's her first time doing this. I think she deserves a round of applause. Sorry. You're saying it's nothing, but it's a big deal to do your first event. So, and that she'll feel better, but how does she then communicate that on her resume that she can now do public speaking and facilitate a workshop? To some people, that's going to be far more important than her technical skills, which she has got. So I suppose in a way, I hope that answers the question. But I think going forward, we're going to have to be more rounded. People will be looking for that community element that Melissa talked about. They'll look for that on your resume and not the hobbies. Do you remember when we used to write a resume? It's hobbies, and you think, oh, I'll make a couple up. I love to travel. Really, I wrote it. I remember doing it. That's not going to be enough. So in the balance that Melissa talked about, it's having that balance, doing stuff you're passionate about, because that's going to make you a better person. It's also going to look great on your resume, as in it's going to show you're more rounded, and that's what I look for when I hire people. So, and I will just finish on Adele. Welcome, Adele. I think this is one of your first events. We interviewed for our Director of Legal and Policy. My team will hate me for this. They might not speak to me tomorrow, but I did promise to buy them lunch. We had 2 really strong candidates, and we really struggled to make a decision. On paper, they were both amazing women, funny enough. And so I just said, you know what, we're gonna have 2 lunches. I'm gonna go for lunch, and we'll make a decision as a team. And you know, Adele, absolutely, she loved food. She was just amazing in that situation. You know, when you relax and you just have a coffee and a sandwich, you get to see the true nature of people. And that's when Adele just was streets ahead. We probably never told her that, but so for me, that's what's important when we're, you know, and I think each and every one of us can develop that over time. So thanks, Chelsea.